Somewhere in broad daylight over Greece, something impossible appeared, a massive jet-black flying wing descending out of the sky so silently it felt unreal, like a glitch in reality itself. No engine roar, no visible cockpit, no markings, nothing to identify it, just a shape that didn't belong in the known world. And as it dropped lower toward a military airfield, people froze, phones shaking in their hands, capturing footage they didn't yet understand, some whispering it had to be a B-2 bomber, others too stunned to even speak. But they were all wrong, because what they were witnessing was something far more secret, far more dangerous. A machine so deeply buried inside the United States' black budget that even top-tier defense analysts had argued for years whether it even existed, and yet here it was, fully exposed, caught in daylight, forced into the open for the first time in history, the RQ-180, America's most classified stealth reconnaissance drone, a ghost that was never supposed to be seen. And the reason it revealed itself in March 2026 wasn't an accident, it was necessity, because something had changed, something big enough to force one of the most protected secrets in modern warfare into the light. And that change begins decades earlier at the end of the Cold War, when the legendary SR-71 Blackbird, still one of the fastest and highest flying aircraft ever built, was retired in 1989, leaving behind a dangerous gap because the Blackbird wasn't just fast, it was untouchable, capable of penetrating enemy airspace at over Mach 3 and 85,000 feet, gathering intelligence no one else could reach. But once it was gone, the United States lost its ability to see inside the most heavily defended regions on Earth without being detected. Satellites tried to fill the gap, but they were predictable, locked into orbital paths that enemies could anticipate and avoid. And what the military needed wasn't just another aircraft, it needed something invisible, something persistent, something that could watch without ever being seen. And so almost immediately, a classified program began, hidden behind layers of secrecy, funded through black budgets, awarded to Northrop Grumman after beating Boeing and Lockheed Martin in a silent competition that would never be publicly acknowledged. And this program had one goal: to create a next generation penetrating ISR platform that could enter denied airspace undetected, stay there for hours, even days, and leave without anyone ever knowing it had been there. And the result of years of secret development, likely at places like Area 51, was something extraordinary. A flying wing design, even cleaner and more refined than the B-2, stripped of anything that could reflect radar, engineered with such precision that it blurred the line between aircraft and shadow, and by 2010 it had likely already taken its first flight. By 2016, multiple prototypes were airborne, and by the late 2010s it was quietly entering operational service, flying missions no one outside a tiny circle of insiders even knew were happening, until small cracks began to appear. Brief sightings in 2020 over California, a strange white aircraft high above the desert, then another over the Philippines, earning whispers and nicknames like the White Bat, but still nothing confirmed, nothing solid, just fragments of a story too big to fully surface, until March 18th, 2026, when everything changed, when a local Greek news site reported an emergency landing at Larissa Air Base, describing a massive, unfamiliar aircraft, unlike anything they had ever seen, mistakenly calling it a B-2, but within hours, the global open source intelligence community locked onto the truth, identifying it with high confidence as the RQ-180, and suddenly the ghost had a face. Analysts dissected every frame of footage, every angle, every reflection, uncovering details that were never meant to be public, revealing advanced sensor apertures capable of scanning vast areas without flying directly overhead, suggesting a surveillance capability so powerful it could monitor entire regions from the edge of detection, using angled electro-optical systems to watch targets continuously while remaining effectively invisible. And it didn't stop there, because beneath its smooth exterior likely sits a combination of synthetic aperture radar and ground moving target indicator systems, technologies that together create a living map of the battlefield, tracking not just terrain, but movement vehicles, personnel, missile systems, everything in real time, in any weather, day or night, meaning this aircraft doesn't just observe, it understands, it builds a complete, constantly updating picture of everything happening below. And when you combine that with its estimated range of over 14,000 miles, endurance of up to 24 hours, an altitude of 60,000 feet, you get something terrifyingly effective. A platform that can sit above a country for an entire day without being seen, without being touched, gathering intelligence that shapes entire military operations. And that's exactly why it was there. Because the moment you place this aircraft in Greece, within reach of Iran during an active conflict, it stops being a mystery and becomes evidence that the United States needed its most advanced, most secret surveillance system in one of the most dangerous airspaces on Earth, because other drones were failing. MQ-9 Reapers, powerful but not stealthy, were being shot down, millions of dollars lost, missions compromised. And in that environment, only one type of platform could survive: something invisible, something untouchable, something like the RQ-180. And suddenly its appearance isn't just shocking, it's logical. Because when the stakes are high enough, even the most guarded secrets get deployed, and sometimes, as happened here, they get exposed. What the footage from Larissa truly exposed was not just the existence of the RQ-180, but the terrifying scale of what it can actually do. Because once analysts slowed the video down frame by frame, a pattern began to emerge, one that pointed to a level of surveillance capability far beyond anything previously deployed in active combat zones. Starting with the most striking detail visible beneath the aircraft, a pair of precisely angled electro-optical sensor apertures positioned just behind the landing gear. Subtle, almost invisible at first glance, but once identified, impossible to ignore. And these were not ordinary cameras, not even close. These were likely multispectral sensor systems designed to operate across multiple wavelengths simultaneously, meaning they can see heat, movement, structural outlines, and even disturbances in terrain all at once. And here is where it becomes unsettling, because these sensors are not pointed straight down like traditional reconnaissance systems. They are angled outward, one to the left, one to the right, allowing the drone to scan massive horizontal distances while never flying directly above its target, which means it can remain far outside the most dangerous zones of enemy air defenses while still collecting extremely detailed intelligence, effectively watching from the shadows. And when you combine that with a flight pattern known as a racetrack orbit, the implications are staggering, because the RQ-180 can loop endlessly at extreme altitude, maintaining uninterrupted surveillance over a target area for hours without ever revealing its position, never crossing directly overhead, never triggering predictable detection patterns, just circling silently, patiently, like a predator that doesn't need to rush. And that alone would already place it generations ahead of older ISR platforms. But the deeper analysts looked, the more capabilities began to surface because those optical sensors are only one piece of a much larger system, and evidence strongly suggests the presence of both synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, and ground moving target indicator radar, known as GMTI, operating in tandem. And this combination is what transforms the RQ 180 from a spy drone into something closer to an all seeing battlefield intelligence node, because SAR can generate incredibly high resolution images of terrain, even through clouds, darkness, or camouflage, effectively turning night into day and rendering concealment almost meaningless, while GMTI tracks movement in real time, isolating vehicles, convoys, or even individual units as they move across complex terrain. And when these systems are fused together, the result is a continuously updating, multi layered map of reality itself, a dynamic picture of everything happening on the ground where nothing stays hidden for long. And this is exactly the kind of capability required to solve one of the hardest problems in modern warfare: the detection and tracking of mobile missile launchers, because Iran does not rely on static launch sites that can be easily targeted. Instead, it uses highly mobile platforms, often disguised as civilian trucks, constantly relocating, blending into normal traffic patterns, moving through mountainous terrain, urban environments, and underground facilities, launching missiles and disappearing within minutes. And this creates a nightmare scenario for traditional surveillance systems, because by the time a satellite passes overhead or a conventional drone reaches the area, the launcher is already gone. But the RQ 180 changes that equation completely, because it doesn't rely on predictable orbits or vulnerable flight paths. It stays in the sky, continuously watching, tracking movement patterns over time, identifying anomalies, predicting behavior, and feeding that intelligence directly into strike networks in real time, meaning that instead of reacting after a launch, commanders can now anticipate it, locate the launcher before it fires, and neutralize it with precision. And that is a fundamental shift in the balance of power, because it turns a reactive system into a proactive one. And that kind of advantage is exactly why this aircraft was deployed in the first place. Because by the time Operation Epic Fury escalated, the limitations of existing platforms had already become painfully clear, with multiple MQ-9 Reapers shot down by Iranian air defenses, proving that non-stealth drones simply cannot survive in heavily contested airspace. And even high-altitude platforms like the RQ-4 Global Hawk, while capable of long endurance, lack the stealth necessary to operate safely against modern radar systems, leaving a critical gap in intelligence gathering right when it was needed most. And into that gap stepped the RQ 180, not as an experiment, not as a test, but as a fully operational asset designed specifically for this kind of environment. And its role likely goes far beyond just surveillance, because multiple expert analyses suggest it may also be conducting electronic intelligence operations, passively collecting radar emissions, communication signals, and electronic signatures across vast areas, building a detailed map of the enemy's entire electromagnetic environment, identifying radar sites, tracking communication nodes, and even detecting changes in signal patterns that could indicate imminent activity. And if that wasn't enough, there is also strong speculation that the RQ 180 may carry electronic warfare capabilities, allowing it not just to observe, but to interfere, to jam, disrupt, or degrade enemy systems at critical moments, creating windows of opportunity for strike aircraft to move in undetected, and perhaps most importantly, it may serve as a high-altitude communications relay, acting as the invisible backbone of an entire operational network, linking fighters, bombers, drones, and ground forces into a single coordinated system, ensuring that data flows instantly between all elements of the battlefield. And when you step back and look at all of this together, the picture that emerges is not just of a drone, but of a central node in a much larger system, a system designed to dominate information. Because in modern warfare, information is everything. And the side that sees first, understands first, and acts first holds the advantage. And the RQ-180 is built to ensure that advantage belongs to the United States, but that advantage came at a cost, because the emergency landing at Larissa didn't just reveal the aircraft to the public, it revealed it to America's adversaries, providing them with their first real opportunity to study its shape, its design, its acoustic signature, its operational patterns. And while a few images may not be enough to replicate such a complex system, they are enough to begin developing countermeasures, enough to reduce the margin of invisibility that had protected the program for years. And that raises a critical question: why risk exposing such a valuable asset? And the answer is simple: because the mission demanded it, because the intelligence it provides is too important, too decisive to withhold, even if it means sacrificing some degree of secrecy. And that decision tells you everything you need to know about the stakes of the conflict, because when a nation is willing to reveal one of its most guarded capabilities, even unintentionally, it means the situation on the ground requires every possible advantage. And that is exactly what the RQ-180 delivers: an advantage measured not just in technology, but in awareness, in precision, in control, and somewhere high above the battlefield, far beyond what the human eye can see, it is still there, still watching, still mapping, still feeding the flow of information that determines what happens next. And the most unsettling part of all is this: if this is the capability we can now see, imagine what still remains hidden. And this is where the story stops being just about one aircraft and starts becoming something much bigger, something far more unsettling, because the sudden exposure of the RQ-180 is not an isolated complang. It is a glimpse into a silent arms race that has been accelerating for years beneath the surface of global awareness. A race not for bombs or missiles, but for something far more decisive: information dominance, the ability to see everything, everywhere, all at once, without ever being seen in return. And once you understand that the appearance of this aircraft over Greece takes on an entirely different meaning, because it signals that the United States is not just participating in this race, it is operating at a level that most of its rivals are still struggling to reach. But not for long, because as multiple defense analyses have pointed out, countries like China are already developing their own stealthy flying wing drones, platforms like the WZ-8 and the CH-7, designed with similar principles in mind: high altitude, long endurance, low observability. And while none of them are publicly confirmed to match the RQ 180 inches capability, the trajectory is clear. The gap is closing. And that means the advantage the U.S. currently holds is both real and temporary. And that makes every deployment of the RQ-180 not just a mission, but a calculated risk. Because each time it flies, each time it is seen, even briefly, it gives adversaries more data, more insight, more opportunities to study and eventually counter it. And that is exactly what happened after the Larissa incident, because within days, intelligence communities around the world were analyzing the footage, modeling the aircraft shape, estimating its radar cross-section, studying its flight characteristics, even attempting to approximate its acoustic signature based on the recordings captured by civilians. And while none of that immediately neutralizes the platform, it begins the long process of eroding its invisibility, turning a ghost into something that can at least be anticipated, if not directly detected. And that is the hidden cost of what happened in March 2026, a cost that cannot be undone, only managed. And yet, despite that, the aircraft continues to operate, which tells you something critical. Whatever it is doing over Iran is important enough to justify that risk. And when you look at the battlefield itself, it becomes clear why. Because the conflict is not just about airstrikes or territorial control. It is about tempo, about speed, about who can act faster than the other side can react. And in that environment, the ability to track mobile missile launchers in real time is not just valuable, it is decisive, because every launcher that is found before it fires is a strike prevented. Every movement tracked is an opportunity created, and the RQ-180 is uniquely positioned to make that possible, operating at 60,000 feet, far above most threats, staying airborne for up to 24 hours, covering enormous distances without refueling, silently building a picture of the battlefield that is more complete than anything any human commander has ever had access to before, and feeding that data directly into a network of assets ready to act on it. Fighters like the F-35, bombers, naval platforms, even ground-based systems, all connected, all synchronized, all dependent on the flow of information that the RQ-180 helps provide. And that is why some analysts believe it may be doing even more than surveillance, that it could be acting as a central node in a distributed warfare system, coordinating operations, relaying communications, even supporting electronic attacks at precisely the right moment to blind enemy defenses, just long enough for a strike to get through. And if that is true, then what we are looking at is not just a reconnaissance drone, but a keystone asset in a new model of warfare, one where platforms are not isolated tools, but interconnected pieces of a much larger system, each one enhancing the effectiveness of the others. And at the center of that system is something that was never supposed to be seen, something that until recently existed only in rumors and speculation, and now has been dragged into the light by a single unexpected event, an emergency landing that forced the United States to reveal just a fraction of what it is capable of. And even that fraction is enough to reshape how we understand modern conflict, because it proves that the battlefield is no longer just physical, it is informational. It exists in data, in signals, in patterns, in the invisible layers of reality that most people never think about. And the side that controls those layers controls everything that happens on the surface. And right now, the RQ-180 represents one of the most advanced tools ever created to achieve that control. But the story doesn't end there, because the exposure of this aircraft also raises questions about what comes next, about how long its advantage can be maintained, about what countermeasures are already being developed in response, about whether future conflicts will see multiple nations deploying similar platforms, each one trying to out-invisible the other, creating a sky filled with aircraft that no one can see, but everyone knows are there, watching, listening, waiting. And if that sounds like science fiction, it shouldn't, because it is already happening, and the events of March 2026 are proof of that. Proof that the line between secrecy and reality is thinner than ever, and that sometimes all it takes is one malfunction, one forced landing, one moment of exposure to reveal an entire hidden world, a world where wars are shaped not just by firepower, but by awareness, by who knows what, when, and how quickly they can act on it. And as you watch this somewhere high above the earth, beyond sight, beyond sound, there is almost certainly another aircraft like the one seen in Larissa, still in operation, still unseen, continuing its mission, collecting data, mapping movements, feeding the machine of modern warfare. And the unsettling truth is this: we have now seen just enough to know it exists, but nowhere near enough to understand everything it can do. And that uncertainty, that gap between what is visible and what is hidden, may be the most powerful weapon of all.